My name is Michael Giovenco, and thank you for coming to my senior recital. I will be playing 4 pieces, each followed by an explanation of the creative process. I use samples in some pieces. Any track that uses a direct sample is not being sold as a product, it is simply shared on SoundCloud. If you would like to inform yourself about music copyright law, you can visit copyright.gov. There will be a Q&A at the end, so make note of any questions you have during the lecture. I like stealing when I make music. Sometimes I sample a song, other times I'll quote someone else's melody. There are many forms of thievery. Some artists are more against stealing than others, but I find it creatively inspiring. If we imagine a spectrum, on the right side there is taking a direct sample from another song, and on the left side is influence. I enjoy creating by knowing my influences and stealing from them in a way that is meaningful. As T.S. Eliot stated, immature poets imitate, mature poets steal, bad poets deface what they take, and good poets make it into something better, or at least something different. This applies to music as well, and I follow this philosophy. All 4 of my pieces I will show you today are pastiche. Merriam-Webster defines pastiche as a literary, artistic, musical, or architectural work that imitates the style of a previous work. Let's listen to my first piece, Spooky Scary. Spooky Scary was created as an audition to join Tech Ensemble my sophomore year at UNF in late 2019. Each student was given the same Mozart violin excerpt from Symphony No. 40 in G minor and told to create a piece that uses that melody. I initially read the melody and played it on keyboard, having not been familiar with it. This resulted in a halftime feel that the original piece did not have. I enjoyed the ominous feel of the tempo I naturally leaned into and proceeded to lean into that mood for the rest of the piece. I was imagining a horror version of Disney World in a classic haunted theme park fashion. I was inspired by the rumors of Walt Disney's head being frozen and the idea that a place marketed to be magical could have a creepy side to it. I ran with this disturbed version of Disney and performed vocal lines that weren't whispers, but they weren't loud either. The vocal tone is normal and sounds as if it's spoken effortlessly. The vocal performance, coupled with the warm-sounding plug-in Isotope vinyl, created an inviting tone that drew me in. The keyboard part has tremolo, chorus, and delay on it, the tremolo and chorus being attached to Logic's stock keyboard. The tremolo is set to a pulsing dotted eighth note, while the chorus has a mild intensity and a rate with both knobs at 12 o'clock. The delay comes from Valhalla's plug-in frequency echo and is set for quick stutters. This sound created a whisper effect that tapped my ear and then backed off. I knew I wanted industrial percussion, specifically the sounds of trash cans being hit in various ways, and the initial use of the Mozart interpolation made me want to take sounds from Disney itself. After some searching, I found a Disney group called the Janitors, who use trash cans as percussion instruments. This is what they originally sounded like. I sampled select parts of their performance and used the parts to make up all the drum sounds you hear. The kick drum is a clean trash can hit with the plug-in MH thump on it to bring out the low end. A mix of the dry and wet signal make up the entire kick, the wet signal being the low end frequencies and the dry signal emulating the beater of a kick. I used 2 layers of compression and a noise gate to tame the decay of the low end and create a distinctly distorted thump. The hi-hat is loop stick clicks. The snare is a trash can hit that has a fast attack with a release that allows the can's natural reverb to shine. The extra percussion parts all simply have EQ. So I managed to use the Janitor's drum sample in a groove that sounded familiar yet unique. While the drums are nice on the ears, they also add to the haunted Disney environment. Because the drums were actually from Disney, I felt more inspired by them and in turn gained the motivation to see the project through meaningfully. I began to be inspired by Tim Burton and the general aesthetic of his films. Here are some images from his films, as these scenes were on my mind during the creative process. On the right, we have an image from his film Coraline, and on the left, The Nightmare Before Christmas. As far as other instruments go, there is a synth bass with an affected duplicate layered on top. The second synth bass is what truly makes the song's intro sound. I did some gain stacking with distortion pedal emulators. I'll show you how the sound of the bass changed as I layered different gain stages. So here is the bass with none of these fuzzes or overdrives engaged. Here is the bass with the pink candy fuzz. Here's the bass with the candy fuzz and the octafuzz. And then we have 3 gain stages. And 4 gain stages. And lastly, 5 gain stages. All of the gain compressed the instrument and brought out the previously subtle delay on the bass plugin. With the gain stages added, the synth sounds as if it's self-oscillating, and the sonic imprint inspired me to keep working. The intro to Spooky Scary sounds like I'm being warped through space to an alternate universe Disney. Each synth pulse is disorienting and intense. Vocals were recorded using a Sennheiser E835 dynamic mic up close for creepy intimacy without being too whispery. The lead vocal is double, as in the audio file is in 2 separate tracks with 2 different sets of plugins. One vocal is heavily compressed and lacks mid-range, while the other is much less compressed and has the plugin Isotope Vinyl on it. This plugin emulates characteristics of vinyl, giving the track a very distinct mid-range. These 2 vocals complement each other and essentially work as parallel compression. The tracks also have different frequency responses. The compressed vocal acts as the foundation, while the other part adds dynamic range. The backup vocals needed to sound like an ensemble cast of creatures with different vocal tones to complement their character. I laid down individual vocal tracks that each had their own distinct characteristics. Put the voices together and you have a handful of creepy characters greeting you at Disney World. Even if their creepiness is a bit silly or campy, I actually like it more that way. Here are the vocal harmonies.
Now you're here, it's so clear, the most magical place for me.
The D minor to C7 add 9 chord progression song creates short-term tension and relief. When writing this part, I didn't think of it as D minor to C7, I just heard where I wanted my voice to sit in filling out the harmony. Still, the two notes that change add character because they bend from note to note, making those voices distinct. If you were to solo tracks middle harmony 1 and middle harmony 2, they don't usually hit a direct note. They dip slightly under or over the starting note because they emphasize speech patterns and dissonance over distinct pitches. How I approached each vocal was in part informed by the effect I wanted for each character, which was informed by my Tim Burton inspiration. During the vocal harmonies, I used an arpeggiating synth, and the upright bass comes in with the drums to add to the groove. Then there is the section where instruments freestyle over the Mozart melody, and we have some harmonies before a beat switch. The vocal sample that bridges the majority of the song to the end is from a video from 1954 titled The Disneyland Story, Disneyland Episode No. 1, further bringing real Disney content into this new context. Let's watch part of said video.
But the truth of the matter is, something unusual is going on in the studio today.
The ending of the piece showcases a goofy approach that closes out the world in an abrupt way. I messed around with my guitar and ended up with some nice sounding parts that add to the wonkiness of the section. Spooky Scary borrowed left and right to become what it is today, a unique experience that celebrates its influences. The second piece I would like to share with you is a song called Boots Bros. Let's listen to it.
New boots, they froze, you want me to groove, just let me go. How am I supposed to chill this beat so cold? How come you keep stepping on my floor? Just give me something I can tie to. Turn this shit off, I can hear my body beating blows. Stop shaking your ass, just let me go. There's nobody, see the body on the floor. Just play a song that I can die to. Need I start remind you, nobody invite you. I'm starting to think my alley got lit by some guys who need a place to ride with. Girls, they never line. I thought the year was 2020, but you can't see that. New boots, they froze, you want me to groove, just let me go. How am I supposed to chill this beat so cold? How come you keep stepping on my floor? Just give me something I can die to. Just give me something I can die to. Need I start remind you, nobody invite you. I'm starting to think my alley got me by some guys who need a place to run with. Girls, they never line. I thought the year was 2020, but you can't see that I'm trying to die. No, it wasn't about the look in your eyes. Don't feel bad, it's not the thoughts you disguise. It's just this isn't exactly what I wanted to. isn't exactly what I wanted to.
I released this track under my artist name, Trash Boy. This song was written while I was improvising on guitar and singing. As I wrote the melodic cadence of the lyrics, I knew I enjoyed the ideas, but didn't know what direction to take them in. Looking further towards my inspirations helped the creative process, and in this case, I was inspired by the band in 1975. The tone of Boots Froze reminded me of their song Sincerity is Scary, so I leaned into qualities the two pieces shared. I kept the groove simple but infectious, kept both songs in the key of A major, and even used similar notes in the vocal melody. The melodies in the verses of both songs focus on the notes A, B, C sharp, D, and E, which are scale degrees 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the key of A major. Focusing on the first 5 scale degrees of the major scale isn't shared solely among these two songs, neither is using an infectious groove or using the key of A major. It's all of these choices together that achieve the tonal similarities between both tracks, a connection that is better shown than explained. Let's listen to a chorus of the 1975's Sincerity is Scary. Here's a portion of the chorus.
Why can't we be friends when we have see always ends with us hating each other?
The drums in Boots Froze are simple yet effective. It's a fat 4-on-the-floor kick snare beat. The hi-hats are basic. They play on the and of every beat with some exceptions. Every third measure of the 4-bar loop, I drop a set of hi-hats. Also, in the fourth measure of the loop, the hi-hats are on the E and of 4 instead of the normal and This visual representation of the hi-hat pattern shows play beats in turquoise and rests in white, which is helpful for musicians, but here's a visual that will assist non-musicians. The turquoise zeros represent hi-hat hits. Moving notes on syncopated beats and removing notes keeps the part dynamic and interesting. I will now play the hi-hat part with a metronome, and you can follow along if you'd like to. The electric bass line came next. It's a very simple slap bass part. The part is all about timing and feel. I had to make sure to nail it from every slap and string pop. Playing electric bass instead of programming bass brought life into the track and injected some of my personality as a musician. Every musician has a specific way they approach their instrument, and there are subtleties heard when playing electric and acoustic instruments that aren't heard through software instruments. Even though I began writing the song on guitar, it became supplementary in the actual recording. For the verses, I plugged my Gibson SG into a Vox AC30, both close mic'd and room mic'd. The close mic is a Sennheiser E835, and the room mic is a Samson CO2 condenser microphone. The room mic is mixed about as loud as my close mic, if not louder. This isn't conventional, as usually the close mic will be further up front, but I liked the natural reverb coming from the room. It is a subtle and short reverb, but it makes the guitar sound authentic and lively. The chorus guitar sound is similar with the addition of a super high gain guitar running through my Boss MT2. This makes the chorus guitars sound fuller and brings them closer to the forefront of the listener's attention. The lead guitar sound is a bright southern rock sound that I occasionally mix with distorted guitar and synth. This is where I moved from inspiration towards stealing, as the approach to the lead guitar lines were taken from the 1975 song Chocolate. Let's listen to my guitar part and then the 1975's part as played by Adam Hahn in an interview with Boss. Here's mine. And here's the guitar part from Chocolate. I took the happy, plucky, major pentatonic style from guitarist Adam Hahn and brought it into Boots Froze. While this isn't a direct sample, the similarities are closer to stealing on the stealing-borrowing spectrum I previously mentioned. In measure 45, I stole the approach to the 1975's intro in their song Menswear, and applied it to a little guitar lick. Here is my guitar lick, and I'll compare it to the intro of Menswear. Mine. The Menswear intro. I achieved this by bending up to a note and back down without re-articulating the note, creating a slippery effect. The synth chords add to the pulse of the 4-on-the-floor drums by emphasizing beat 1. They fill in the mid-range with the guitars and make the song sound bubbly and light. As a final reference to the 1975, I begin Boots Froze with the sound of a beer cap hitting the floor. This is a reference to my favorite 1975 song, Girls, which begins with a soda can opening. Here is the Boots Froze intro. And here's the Girls intro. The next song I will share is a cover of the Kid Laroi and Justin Bieber song Stay. I collaborated with a coworker who I teach kids music camps with. We have been enjoying teaching the kids Stay and felt inspired to make our own rendition. Here is our cover.
I do the same thing I told you that I never would. I told you I should. Even when I knew I never could, I know I won't. Find nobody else as good as you. I need you to stay. Need you to stay. I can't run you wake up. I'm wasted. Still I feel like the time now. I'm wasted. Yeah, I feel like I can't feel the way I will be locked up if you can't be right.
Let's start by looking at the drums in the first verse. The track Dry Thump has a direct and punchy kick with a dry snare. Layering it with the track Boom Clap added a kick that sounded more acoustic and thick claps. The track called Slap Kick added a smack-sounding attack to the kick drum, giving the impression that the kick is intense. I found this kick sound on the internet looking for Tyler the Creator drum sounds. With some distortion and EQ, it truly fit into the song and added an extra dimension. Here is a comparison of my kick and the kick in Tyler's song, Gone Gone Thank You. Here's mine. And here's Tyler's. While I am unashamed of the fact that I take sounds, I wrestled with whether or not this sound went against my values. Usually when I directly take a sound, I either alter alter the sound drastically, or make it contextually obvious that the sound is a sample. In this case, I was simply stealing a kick drum from another song and altering it minimally. I decided this was ethical because the kick was changed and layered in with 2 other kick drums to make the full part. Moving on to bass, I used the plugin Sub-Lab by Future Audio Workshop. The 808 sound is a custom setting I made when twiddling with some knobs. When you play a note on a MIDI keyboard using my setting, the note sounds an octave and a fifth above the played note. If you hold down the note slowly descends, and if you let go, the actual played pitch sounds. The part I play and stay has me hopping off of keys quickly, but I do use that descending effect sparsely throughout the song. I like the character of the bass. It sounds hollow in some frequency areas and full in specific low and mid-range frequencies. The rhythm parts and stay are inspired by drum and bass music, specifically by TikTok creator Baba. Here is one of his videos. I wanted my drums to hit hard like his did, and this informed many of my sonic decisions. While the tempo of my stay cover is slower and grooves differently, I wanted some of the spastic nature that his drums have. In verse 2, I achieved this with breakbeat type rhythms. Baba's keyboard part sounded muted, leading me to explore keyboard parts mimicking that of a Fender Rhodes. Here are some keyboard tracks I recorded using a borrowed Casio CT6500. This one's titled Deep Synth. The next keyboard sound is the guitar setting on the Casio and had a campy video game feel to it. While the sound itself is a bit goofy, in the context of the song, it bridges the gap between distorted guitars and keyboards and is used sparsely. And this lead synth part emulates the melody from the original version of Stay. Harkening back to the influence from Baba, I wanted to show you the drums in verse 2 of the song. I used mostly the same software instruments from the first verse, but I varied the way they interact. As I mentioned, there is a spastic breakbeat style that I took from Baba's piece and ran with. Here is the second half of verse 2 with just drums and vocals.
Only last Saturday, whatever I can say, no matter what. You may not like me, I always know the fucking things you won't show. But then you will see that they may be different, but they'll never be me.
The drums in verse 2 start out simple, but open up into a more complex groove that we just listened to. The last major influence on this cover is the band Belmont, specifically their song, Overstepping, which I will share a snippet of now. I wanted to create a guitar part that used similar chords and tone to their guitar part in the intro of Overstepping. I already knew how to play the song on guitar, so it wasn't a hard task to make a Belmont-style guitar part for my cover. Here's the part I wrote. If memory serves, this sound was my Gibson SG into my Zebex Boxer Block Distortion, and then into my Vox AC30. It's a simple guitar sound that is characterized by the amount of gain pushing the amp. Belmont's guitar part is much faster in its strumming and chord changes, so to compensate, I did some palm-muted chugs and some lead lines in between chords. While achieving the drum and bass sound took more software instruments, more sound design decisions, and more time, the blend of drum and bass and easy chord influences are what define the track to me. The distorted guitars are essential to the character of the track, and in my mind help solidify the identity of the cover. The guitar solo at the end of the cover was meant to accentuate the rock influences in a subtle way. The solo is melodic and legato, helping ease the song into a relaxed space to wind down and end. The influences in this track came more subconsciously than that of my other songs. Only after the fact did I realize I was trying to achieve a drum and bass sound similar to what Baba does on TikTok, and while I knew I was creating Belmont-style guitars, I wasn't focused on creating Belmont-style music. I just used what I had in my arsenal that had recently sparked something inside of me and ran with it. With a tighter than usual deadline, this was not a project I had the luxury of sitting on for long. Inspiration needed to come quickly, and I had to use what was there. Ultimately, Baba and Belmont guided me along my journey. This next piece, titled Chainsaw Boy, requires explaining before I showcase it. This is a collection of sonic ideas inspired by the manga Chainsaw Man by Tatsuki Fujimoto. Manga are graphic novels from Japan and often have a unique style to the medium. In order to keep things simple, I'll refer to Chainsaw Man as a graphic novel for the rest of the lecture. Chainsaw Man falls under horror and action genres. It is about a human chainsaw hybrid who works for an organization fighting devils. I'll play the track and then further explain my inspirations. Here is an image of the main character, Denji, who is Chainsaw Man. My initial idea was to create a guitar that sounded like a chainsaw. This may seem silly in the world of music technology, where I could easily find an actual chainsaw sound effect online, but the goal wasn't for the guitar to sound exactly like a chainsaw. I was trying to achieve what it would sound like if the essence of Denji's chainsaw form was packed and put in a guitar tone. The guitar part is a simple chord progression inspired by Self-Sufficient, a song my band, The Third Estate, was working on at the time. There are 3 recorded guitar tracks that make up the one part. The first guitar track is my guitar going through a Boss MT2 into an Earthquaker Devices Univibe and into my Vox AC30, which has its own tremolo. A Univibe pedal creates a chorus and vibrato effect at the same time. It has a distinct throbbing sound. The first guitar track had the Univibe on very subtly. The second track has an intense Univibe effect that creates a much more noticeable throb with a squishy mid-range. The third and last guitar track uses a JHS Charlie Brown overdrive and my amp's tremolo. This third track is meant to sound like a tube amp being pushed really hard into extreme breakup. Together, the 3 parts sounded huge and nasty, but I wanted them to be even bigger and more harmonically rich. I knew if the guitars were too saturated, they would sound muddy, so I kept that in mind while working. I bussed all of the guitars to one track and then ran them through stock EQ and Audio Damage's Fuzz Plus 3. The fuzz brings out crazy high-end harmonics that I enjoy. Then I printed the sound to a single track so I could have a sense of closure with the sound design. That printed track, coupled with the original distorted guitar sitting under it, makes the chainsaw guitar sound. Let's listen to the chainsaw guitar sound before and after it was sent to EQ, fuzz, and Isotope's ozone stereo imager. So here is before those effects. And here's after. This was the most crucial part of the process, as its purpose is to sound like Denji, the main character of the series. The drums are inspired by the trailer for the upcoming TV adaptation of Chainsaw Man. Here is the music from the trailer. Again, I found myself taking inspiration from industrial drum and bass music. Initially, I wasn't happy with the fact that I had been inspired by music so closely related to the source material. I wanted originality, but I also wanted to take the path most inspiring. So I decided to use the inspiration and trust that I would create something original. The track Club Kick is the main kick drum. It sounds exactly how it's described, like a kick drum you would hear in a nightclub. The track Kicks has two supplementary kick drums. The first is an 8-bit video game sounding kick, and the second a knocking kick. I used a high-pass filter on this track, that way the club kick could dominate the low end. The track Huge Snare is a heavily compressed snare, heavily affected snare sample. The original snare was already fat sounding, but things began to take shape as I layered effects. Eventually, I landed on this extremely compressed sound. I like the way the snare sputters as it decays. It complements the crunch of the 8-bit kick. There are some reverse snaps that lead into each snare hit, as well as a simple hi-hat part that propels the groove forward. The last percussion sounds are samples of me making noises into my phone mic. Here they are. The go-go-go sound is pitched up a half step. Sometimes you hear something in your head, and the quickest way to make that noise is with your mouth. The synth bass is the finishing touch on this section of the piece. I would refer back to images of Denji when working on this section of the song, especially when working on the guitar tone. Reminding myself where I started and what the goal was helped guide the writing process. Now we'll move on to the B section of the piece, which is notably when the chainsaw guitar stops playing. The goal of the B section is to create a sonic palette that represents Denji's infatuation with the women in his life and how that infatuation is inherently tied to his job as Chainsaw Man. Denji is in love with his boss, and she has a stranglehold on his life decisions, but he is immature and has no issue separating the two parts of his life. The song I sampled is a 70s track called Fallen in Love by Hamilton, Joe Frank, and Reynolds. Here's the original song.
Baby, baby, falling in love. I'm falling in love again. Baby, baby, falling in love. I'm falling in love again.
I sped up the sample and pitched it up a fourth. I also EQ'd out the high end and low end to give it that vintage sample sound. Here is Fallen in Love with my alterations. In Fallen in Love, they sing, "Baby, baby, fallen in love again," which relates directly to Denji's character. Denji is a 16-year-old working with adults, and he thinks he's in love with every woman that shows him attention. Then when he realizes he doesn't care for them as much as he thought, he convinces himself it's because he will always only have eyes for his boss, therefore falling in love over and over again. I recorded 2 guitar tracks and a bass track to accompany the sample. Guitar 1 was recorded straight into my Vox AC30 with the preamp volume high enough to break up when I dug into the strings. Guitar 2 is a smoother and cleaner sound recorded with less preamp gain and on the neck pickup. I play the same part as Guitar 1, just articulated differently. The bass accompanies the guitar, filling out the low end. The B section instrumentation feels bouncy and light, reflecting Denji's euphoric headspace as he daydreams. I added a chainsaw sound effect, not a guitar this time, but the sound of an actual chainsaw. This acts as a light reminder to Denji that even though he thinks his personal life is separate from work, his relationships and job are ultimately intertwined. After the B section, I repeat the A section, adding a loud and abrasive guitar solo. The solo is noisy and incorporates many pinch harmonics to display the release of emotions Denji feels when he is in the form of Chainsaw Man. The song ends with the C section. This was written for a character's death. The track Chainsaw Guitar Slowed is the chainsaw guitar sound at roughly half speed with the high end and low end EQ'd out. There is also a stock chorus effect with low intensity and high rate, creating a more stereo sound. Arturia's Tape Mellify plugin tames the high end and adds some tape emulation. Isotope's Ozone stereo imager is on the track as well, spreading the signal out. This chainsaw guitar gives the sense that time has slowed down while someone is losing their life. Here is the track Chainsaw Guitar Slowed without added effects and then with effects. So here is without. And here's with. The clean guitar track plays a minor 6, minor 4, major 1 chord progression with some add nines. The minor 4 chord sounds especially somber following the minor 6, making it the defining chord of the progression. Next, there is a fuzz lead guitar that is being sent to an intense 16th note tremolo, and the last instrument is a bass guitar. I played chords on bass, creating a full and melancholy sound. The C section captures the tone of a character's death and closes my homage to Chainsaw Man, wrapping up this lecture. Thank you for listening to all of the ideas I stole throughout my college experience. Hopefully I have years of musical kleptomania to look forward to. Here is my works cited. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you. Rachel.
You mentioned earlier Tyler, the creator, the 1975 and Belmont as inspiration. Are these the same influences that you had when you first started getting into music? Who has stayed your influence and who has, who are some new key artists that you have brought in?
Some of those inspirations are more long-term, some are more short-term. I still like Belmont, but they were more of a short-term influence that got me into more hardcore music, but that song is a great song. And then Tyler, the Creator, has been a long-term influence since high school, probably like junior year. But a lot of them are more spur-of-the-moment influences because whatever I'm into the most at one time might tell me what I want to do right now. And then my long-term influences will always show through my playing and what I do. Bands like the Foo Fighters are definitely long-term influences, and things like that will always show through who I am as an instrumentalist, but they aren't as pivotal as they aren't as immediate as my short-term influences. Does that answer the whole question?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Kyle.
So you had some fuzz stages for guitar parts,
Yeah.
especially in the last one. So did you use a lot of analog fuzz pedals, or did you use some of the digital fuzz that used in bass and other songs?
Those fuzz gain stages for the bass were all digital effects. It was just messing around with sound design basically, because obviously everybody likes analog gear more than digital gear in the general sense of effects pedals or guitar effects pedals. But my thought process was just I want to just see where this goes. At the time, I wasn't really thinking much about it being used for anything really. And so I just put gain and then added more gain and then added more gain, and it just got to where it ended up. Any more questions? Cool. That's it. Thank you for coming. You are free to go.